Hello, I am Olga Chavez, EPCC Director of Diversity and Inclusion Programs. I thank you for joining us for another Diversity and Inclusion workshop. Today, we are celebrating Indigenous Peoples Month. Both EPCC faculty and staff, as well as members of the community, have developed this presentation. Their efforts, along with DNI staff and EPCC TV, have made these informative videos possible. Our office is a platform for many innovative and informative sessions. Should you have some innovative ideas that you would like to bring to the table, please reach out to us. Diversity and inclusion are important elements in any organization, especially EPCC. Let me now have you enjoy our videos, and thank you very much for being here today.
We believe that in order to know who you are, you need to know where you come from. We are the Tiguas of Isleta del Sur Pueblo. Our pueblo's name, Isleta del Sur, means Island of the South. We are the descendants of our forefathers who first came to this land in 1680. The continued practice of our language, culture, songs, dances, ceremonies, and self-reliance is the legacy we leave behind for our children and future generations to come. The annual St. Anthony's Feast is the most sacred of ceremonial observances our pueblo still honors today. And every June 13th, before the sun rises, the cacique and tribal officials assemble at the Tuzla and start the day with a traditional Tigua blessing. The pueblo also observes 12 other traditional feast days throughout the year to pay homage to Catholic saints and honor tribal member namesakes. The history of our people, the hardships we have endured, our perseverance and resilient nature have contributed to our survival. We now take these founding principles to advance the pueblo's vision and determination. We are the Tiguas of Isleta del Sur Pueblo.
Makuam, Kerimba, welcome. My name is Carlos Hisa. I am the tribal governor of the Isleta del Sur Pueblo tribal nation. My responsibility as a governor, first and foremost, is to the citizens of this pueblo. As governor, I oversee the tribal government, the enterprises, and facilitate the legislative affairs of the tribal council alongside the lieutenant governor. In my capacity as a governor, I promote the pueblo in a manner that embodies culture, quality, partnership, and accountability. My position serves as chief liaison between the government, administration, and tribal council to exercise the executive functions, implement laws, policies, and other actions set forth by the tribal council as a whole. The Isleta del Sur Pueblo is a sovereign nation. Tribal sovereignty refers to the tribe's right to govern itself, define our own membership, manage our tribal properties, regulate tribal businesses, and domestic relations. Throughout our history, our people have had to endure the trauma that has plagued us through centuries of exposure to racism, warfare, violence, and disease. Even federal policy was created to remove, relocate, isolate, in some cases terminate the existence of our people, which resulted in social, economic, and spiritual struggles. Cultural trauma has affected the essence of our community and our tribal people and has created apprehensive attitudes towards outsiders. As Pueblo people, we are driven and inspired by the sacrifices and legacies left behind by the Tigua nation builders of the past. We honor their teachings and are mindful of the threats that undermine our cultural values and center our work on improving the quality of life for the generations of Tiguas to come. Our unwavering spirit is behind every successful gain in our history, whether it is our success in business development or excellence in government. We have set a path forward that our ancestors would be proud of.
Nakuam, Karimba. Welcome everyone. My name is Rick Quesada and I'm the Director of Cultural Preservation for Isleta del Sur Pueblo. I am honored to be with you today to share a little bit about our tribe with you to help give you a better understanding of who we are as Pueblo people. Our culture is a foundation on which we have continued to build on. Our faith, language, and ceremonies are what define us as Tigua people. Our aim is to continue building our legacy of being a self-sufficient tribal nation with our own tribal government, judicial system, healthcare, education programs, along with a growing economic base of successful enterprises. Today, I will share with you how our Pueblo was established and how our ancestors began this journey in 1680. The story of our Pueblo nation spans countless generations, dating back 9,000 to 10,000 years ago. Our original ancestral home is called Coray, which is located approximately 90 miles southeast of Albuquerque, New Mexico. After many years of drought, our ancestors abandoned Coray and resettled with our sister pueblo of Isleta, which is located south of current-day Albuquerque, New Mexico. Our pueblo's name means Islands of the South. Isleta del Sur is the southernmost pueblo of the Pueblo nations. We are one of 20 pueblos that are located from northern New Mexico to El Paso, Texas. We traditionally were an agricultural people. Throughout time, we have diverted the waters from the Rio Grande to irrigate our fields of corn, squash, beans, chili, and other crops to feed our community. Our subsistence way of life, living from the land, also meant that we hunted deer, buffalo, rabbits, and other game in the foothills and mountains surrounding our pueblo. Our homes were multi-level structures and built from a combination of earth mixed with straw and water. The mud or adobe that was made from the mixture was then poured into forms and made into sun-dried bricks to build walls that were often several feet thick. Our homes kept us warm in the winters and cool in the summers. They had flat roofs, which served as working or resting places, as well as observation points to watch for approaching enemies and view ceremonial occasions. Ladders were used as staircases, which took you from one level to the next. Each pueblo was an independent and separate community. However, we shared a similar language, customs, and system of government. Each pueblo had their own governmental structure to maintain its social system. Matters such as religion, agriculture, hunting, and war were governed by the spiritual leaders of each pueblo. To give you more of an insight, we need to look back 500 years into our history, prior to our first contact with the Spanish conquistadors. Throughout time, our ancestors lived in harmony with the land and our tribal neighbors, up until a pivotal point in our history when we had our first encounters with the Spanish conquistadors. Beginning in 1540, under a royal decree from the King of Spain, Francisco Vázquez de Coronado set out in search for the rumored riches of the 7 cities of gold known as Cibola, and to bring the natives of the new province under the control and dominion of Spain and the Catholic Church. This chapter of Spanish occupation marked one of the most challenging periods in our long history. During the occupation of our ancestral homelands, the Spanish made sure that a Catholic church was built in the heart of each Pueblo community in order to keep control of each Pueblo. This period of our history is well documented by both the Spanish, whose friars kept thorough records in order to report back to their king, In our oral tradition, our history was passed down by our elders in stories from generation to generation. During this period of Spanish occupation, our ancestors had to speak our own language in private for fear of retribution. We had to secretly carry on with our own traditional ceremonies, late at night and far away from the watchful eyes of the Spanish. After 140 years of Spanish rule and authority, our Pueblo ancestors rose up and revolted. And in 1680, our sister Pueblos of the north, under the leadership of Pope, a shaman and leader from the Pueblo of San Juan, forcefully evicted the Spanish military and religious leaders from the New Mexico territory in what is known as the Pueblo Revolt. As the revolt grew in strength from pueblo to pueblo throughout the entire territory, the Spanish narrowly escaped, staying one step ahead of their pursuers. Being totally outnumbered and facing annihilation, the Spanish had no choice but to flee the Pueblo territory and retreat south toward safety into El Paso del Norte. When the Spanish came into what is now known as Albuquerque, they captured as many people as they could from the Pueblo of Isleta and used them as hostages and human shields in order to exit the territory safely. This act of desperation and forced migration of our ancestors south into El Paso is known as the Jornada del Muerto, or Journey of the Dead. This period in our history marks a new chapter for our people and the beginning of a long and challenging period which isolated us from our families from the north and took us away from our homes, our lands, culture, and the way of life. In the 300 plus years following the Pueblo Revolt of 1680, we, the people of Isleta del Sur Pueblo, have not only endured, but are prospering by continuing to walk in the footsteps of our ancestors.
My name is Javier Loera. I am the war captain for the Isleta del Sur Pueblo. The cultural impact the Spanish made on our Pueblo civilization during the periods between the mid-16th century through the 18th century were profound. Their influence can be seen today in how we elect our tribal officials, govern our tribal affairs, and you will see Catholic missions in every pueblo. However, the irony of these two major influences on our way of life are actually the key factors which have allowed our way of life to remain intact. Almost 500 years after the time our ancestors came into contact with the Spanish in 1540. One of the most impactful legacies left behind by the Spanish was the cane of authority. The cane or vara has been used throughout history, dated as far back as the ancient Egyptians. These canes were an acknowledgement of authority and power. The cañas were also a symbol of transference of power as well, from one leader to another. When the Spanish first came into contact with our people, they found a Pueblo society living in communities, exercising a governmental system that they understood and that was very similar to their own. So with the Spanish came their system of governing, which was embodied into the symbolism behind the cane, also known as the vara. In 1620, the first canes were introduced to each pueblo by King Philip II of Spain, requiring our pueblo to elect a governor, lieutenant governor, and officers to carry out the affairs of the pueblo. This system allowed the Spanish to simplify their control by only having to deal with one leader from each pueblo, instead of a group of leaders representing different factions within the same tribe. This system of government, whereby officials were elected by popular vote without interference of the crown or the church, still exists to this day. In 1751, King Charles VI issues a land grant to the people of Isleta del Sur Pueblo. The land grant is 1 league, 3 miles, in each cardinal direction from the center of the Isleta mission. For more than 190 years after the Pueblo revolt of 1680, the Pueblo prospered with its use of the land. In 1821, when Mexico gained their independence from Spain, the Mexican government acknowledged our sovereignty and right to self-government, thus retaining the Pueblo's land grant that was first issued to us by the King of Spain. However, not long after Mexico's independence from Spain, the U.S. government wanted to expand its reach to span from coast to coast to become a continental nation so that it could export their goods from ports on both sides of the country, also known as Manifest Destiny. So began the Mexican-American War, which only lasted 1 year and 9 months, from 1846 to 1848. The vision for Manifest Destiny was to control the New Mexico, California, and Texas territories, and also to include the Oregon, Utah, Nebraska, and Kansas territories, which were purchased from Great Britain. With the end of the Mexican-American War in 1848, New Mexico, Texas, Arizona, and California became territory of the U.S., also known as the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. So in 1848, the Pueblos were brought under American rule, according to the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, which stated that all people were to have certain rights to property, religion, which committed the federal government to protect those rights. Under the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, the federal government agreed to recognize the land grants that were made by the Spanish and Mexican governments. The federal government, however, did not honor this treaty until much later and made no formal acknowledgments of the Pueblo nations. Up until this time, the policy toward Native people was not a favorable one. It was during this period that the term, "the only good Indian is a dead Indian," was commonly used. The policy of dealing with Native people throughout the country that was being followed by both the political and the military was a complete failure. Shortly after his inauguration and facing the possibilities of a civil war, one of Lincoln's goals during this period was to keep the tribes from supporting the Confederate states. At this time, however, the Navajo, the Apache, the Cherokee, and Lakota were also in conflict with the federal government. As hostilities between the natives throughout the country continued to grow, so too was the conflict between the states. President Lincoln now had his hands full with the Civil War and did not want any further support going to the Confederates. And in 1862, the Confederates invaded New Mexico, which was a tipping point for Lincoln in how he had to deal with the Pueblos. Looking beyond the Civil War, President Lincoln wanted to secure their position of expanding the United States into the Pacific Ocean. He knew that the best way for him to do so was to have the support of the Pueblos in order to continue their expansion without additional conflict. In November 1863, Lincoln delivered the Gettysburg Address. Understanding the significance of garnering Pueblo support, Lincoln authorizes the delivery of the canes of authority to all the pueblos by the end of that same year. However, since the pueblo of Isleta del Sur resided in a Confederate state, the pueblo did not receive the Lincoln canes or patents to the original land grant given to other pueblos by the King of Spain. On May 9th, 1871, the Texas legislature passed an act to incorporate the town of Isleta in El Paso County. The 1871 incorporation gave the town of Isleta the power to subdivide pueblo lands, issue land titles, and delegate property ownership under the criterion of citizenship. The 1871 Isleta Incorporation excluded the Tiguas as American Indians from participation in the emerging political economy. To this day, the Pueblo governor is entrusted with the same cane of authority that was first given to our ancestors by the King of Spain as a symbol of sovereignty and governance. As per time-honored tradition, officials are also elected every December 31st. And on January 6th, the day of the Santos Reyes, Three Kings celebration, the newly elected tribal governors and tribal council officially assume power to govern the pueblo for the forthcoming year.
Inumamtima, Makuam, welcome. I am Chris Gomez, Lieutenant Governor of Isleta del Sur Pueblo. The Isleta del Sur Pueblo is a federally recognized tribe located in El Paso, Texas, just south of New Mexico along the U.S. and Mexico border. Established in 1682 by our Tigua ancestors, our pueblo is situated within the sprawling metropolitan expanse of both the cities of El Paso and Socorro. The pueblo has approximately 4,000 enrolled citizens, half of which reside within the El Paso and Hudspeth counties. Our mission is to promote self-sufficiency, improve the quality of life, and preserve the cultural identity for our pueblo. Our pueblo's government's framework rests on the principles of stewardship and service to its citizens. The government and its officials have a fiduciary responsibility to its tribal citizens and deploys programs and services aimed at promoting self-sufficiency, improving the quality of life for our pueblo citizens and families, while preserving our cultural identity. The Tribal Council is the governing body of Isleta del Sur Pueblo, exercising all inherent governmental power, fiscal authority, and tribal sovereignty as recognized in Sections 101 and 104 of the Isleta del Sur Pueblo Restoration Act, passed on August 18, 1987. As the governing body, the Tribal Council passes laws, approves budgets, and sets the overall strategic and legislative direction for the tribal government. Elected tribal officials such as the governor, lieutenant governor, traditional sheriff, and 4 council members serve annual terms. The governor and lieutenant governor serve as the administrator and assistant administrator to oversee the day-to-day operations of the tribal government and directly supervise program directors. The governors also exercise executive functions, meaning they implement laws, policy, and other actions set forth by the tribal council as a whole. The Traditional Council is responsible for maintaining the traditions and customs of the pueblo. They schedule all religious events and practices, including dances and hunts. They safeguard ceremonial assets belonging to the tribe and provide traditional direction and leadership. Traditional council seats include a cacique, our chief, war captain, and 4 capitanes. The cacique and war captain provide spiritual and traditional guidance. Both the cacique and war captain are appointed to lifelong terms. The Isleta del Sur Pueblo is one of over 560 federally recognized tribal nations with a formal government-to-government relationship with the United States. Tribal governments are an important and unique member of the family of American governments as recognized by the United States Constitution. Sovereignty is a legal term that outlines a tribe's authority to self-govern and is affirmed by historical treaties, the Supreme Court, the President, and Congress. Tribes cede millions of acres of land to the United States and in return receive the guarantee of self-government on their own lands. The treaties and laws create a trust responsibility whereby the federal government must protect tribal lands and self-government while providing federal assistance to ensure the tribal community needs are met. Our Pueblo's governmental structure is rooted in 6 core strategic functions: administration, community and economic development, health and human services, tribal court and records, public safety, and quality of life. A total of 13 departments execute these functions and are responsible for the deployment of over 169 programs and services to the YDSP community, including but not limited to social programs, health, economic development, public safety, education, workforce development, youth building, and land management. The Pueblo government also maintains a variety of infrastructure, including housing development, roads, and public buildings. Funding to support the Pueblo's tribal government averages $29 million annually and is derived from a number of revenue sources, including federal and state contracts, grants, and tribal funds. Our budget allocations prioritize direct services, which include programs for healthcare, education, elders' utilities, daycare, and social services, for example. Over half of all grant revenue is from federal agencies, and an average of 70 grants are managed in a given year. The tribal government is a prime employer for tribal members. On average, the government's workforce consists of 200 employees, where 65% are represented by tribal members. Administration. The Departments of Finance and Tribal Operations execute the Pueblo government's administrative duties. Finance and tribal operations provide government program oversight, grants management, and budget services. Tribal operations spearheads Pueblo-wide administrative activities such as the development of the annual operating budget, facilitates strategic planning, and provides the tribal government's year-end report. Economic development. The goal of the Economic Development Department is to create sustained economic development policies and opportunities that improve the quality of life over the long term for the Pueblo members and Pueblo economy. Investing in Pueblo entrepreneurs by way of education and resources is a concentration area for the department, along with research and development for government revenue diversification. Health and human services. Our health and human services professionals are fully committed to the physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being of our citizens. Housed in the heart of the community, our clinic offers a range of services and access to healthcare in an atmosphere of respect, dignity, and cultural sensitivity. Our healthcare team is devoted to promoting wellness on the grounds of improving the quality of life and overall well-being of the Pueblo community. Programs include prevention and intervention services in a wraparound manner to provide a healthcare safety net for every Pueblo child, youth, adult, and elder. Core services include family medicine, dental, optometry, behavioral health, acupuncture, laboratory services, and health education services. Tribal Court and Records. The Tribal Court provides a venue for petitioners to request legal remedy or redress of grievances for adjudication, and to dispense justice in accordance with the Pueblo's Code of Laws. The Tribal Court serves and protects the interests of justice and equity on the Pueblo. It promotes the welfare of the tribe and its members while safeguarding individual rights and community standards. The Tribal Records Division is the official data collection and demographic clearinghouse for the Pueblo, maintaining enrollment and member records. Department of Public Safety. Maintaining a safe community is a priority for the Pueblo government. The Department of Public Safety coordinates police, fire, and emergency management services in an integrated manner. Our tribal police enforce the Pueblo's Code of Laws and provides law enforcement services to its citizens and visitors, while our fire program concentrates on fire prevention activities and building a volunteer response team, and our emergency management personnel coordinate emergencies and disasters through preparation, mitigation, response, and recovery efforts. Empowerment. The Empowerment Department is the Pueblo's hub for education, employment, training, and child care services. Through a host of programs, the department serves a wide range of Tigua members, representing various age groups, educational levels, and socioeconomic backgrounds. The department administers a wide array of adult, youth, and early childhood programs such as pre-K, tutoring, post-secondary scholarship assistance, Tigua language courses, employment skills training, job placement services, financial literacy, and income tax assistance.
As our journey continues, we strive to accept nothing less for our people, government, and enterprises. As Tiguas, we are united in a rich and enduring historical and cultural legacy that we must transfer generationally in the spirit of preservation. Our path forward is rooted in sustainable values such as hard work, discipline, community, and sacrifice. As Pueblo people, we are driven and inspired by the sacrifices and legacies left behind by the Tigua nation builders of the past. We honor their teachings, are mindful of the threats that undermine our cultural values, and center our work on improving the quality of life for the generations of Tiguas to come. For those of you joining our workforce for the first time, our relationship with you is important to us. We are committed to providing you the tools and resources necessary to be successful. Preserving our traditional way of life and leveling the business playing field is a delicate balance for our tribal leadership, yet is critical as our landscape continues to evolve. Our unwavering spirit continues to contribute to improving our quality of life and success for our Pueblo nation and the generations of Tiguas to come. Just as one season changes into the next, we must always prepare each and every generation the transfer of cultural knowledge, civic responsibilities, and overall leadership. As a member of our tribal family, we challenge you to learn as much as you can about the Pueblo's heritage, government, and current events. You now have a responsibility to safeguard, honor, and perpetuate a way of life and culture set by our ancestors. We are most successful when we stand as one. Our strength, perseverance, and vision has allowed us to not just survive, but to thrive. We are the Tiguas of Isleta del Sur Pueblo.
I'm still here.
Hello everyone, welcome to Indigenous Month, Native American Heritage Month. My name is Mary Sue Fimath, I am the youngest of 7 daughters from Doris Silvas Beltran, and we are all tribal members of Isla de Sul Pueblo. Isla de Sul Pueblo is one of 3 federally recognized tribes here in Texas. Our ancestors did descend down from New Mexico during the Pueblo Revolt in 1680s. Sharing our culture and our traditions with our surrounding community has always been a part of who we are as Pueblo people living in an urban city. Living in a very urbanized area, our identity continues to be challenged as Indigenous people, as natives to this land. However, we continue to persevere as a community through song and dance, jewelry and regalia making. We honor those who continue with these traditions and our seamstress who live among our community, who continue to bless us with the beautiful ribbon dresses, the regalia we use for traditional dances. These are things that are handed down through generations. Another tradition that we continue to value and pass down through generations over these centuries of our existence here has been the traditional foods making. One of the traditional foods that we enjoy on a more frequent basis is our Tigua Indian bread. The Indian bread is made out in an horno outside, and only a few community members have hornos at their home, or they have a place they can go to where they have hornos in our community where they can bake. Some can bake on a daily basis, others are baking weekly. When we get prepared for our big feast, it is made with many community members and the hornos that we have on our traditional lands. In the preceding videos, you will be introduced to the process of the Tigua Indian bread baking. My Nina, Mary Silvas, has been one who has carried on this tradition in our family, along with my sister, Deborah Cedillo. They both have teamed up to continue to provide us with Indian bread on a pretty weekly basis. So we are very fortunate that they are able to hand this tradition down to our generations in our family. We do have other bread bakers in our community who continue to also bless all of us. And so in the preceding videos, you will see a little bit more detail as to how the bread is baked and how the horno is prepared for bread baking. You will also get a glimpse into a video of who we are. This video was compiled by another tribal member. He also interviewed tribal leadership on the traditions and the history of our people. And I hope you all enjoy and know that we are here as a people to continue to share our culture, our traditions, our love of who we are. Thank you.
My name is Mary Silvas, but they know me as Mare at the rest. I've been baking bread since I was about 7. At that time, I was I couldn't make it really myself because I was 7, but I could carry the stuff that the women needed to make the bread. So it's been a long time that I've been involved in baking bread. I usually like my bread, I like to eat it with red stew or just toast it and put butter. We get the firewood from the sandhills. It used to be just up the road on Zaragoza when I was younger, let's say like maybe 20, 30 years ago. Now we have to go all the way to the horizon because of the development of the housing. They're building a lot of homes, stores. So we're going further in just to get the mesquite because that's the only wood that we use to make our bread. Once we heat up the oven, which is about 2.5 hours of heating it up, we do throw in wood like every half hour, 2-3 pieces of wood. We don't stuff it up because it'll heat up too much. The oven will heat up the top and it'll heat on the bottom. If we make the fire in there too high, the oven's gonna heat up on top and we're gonna burn our top of the bread. So once we do that, heat it up and we approximately know it's ready, we take it out, we're gonna test it. We test it with a piece of newspaper. It used to be a piece of corn husk to check out the temperature in the oven. It approximately gets up to 325 to 400. Once it's heated, we put in the breads. Meanwhile, the breads have been raising for the same time, about 2.5 hours. We cover up our door here with a wooden panel and burlap sacks that are wet. The oven also has a hole on the side where we cover it up in case the oven is not hot enough. If we see that it's not too hot, we'll cover it up and let the hole cover up to keep the heat inside the oven. And the bread will be ready between 25 to 30 minutes. One thing I remember when I was young, and I stress this a lot to the kids when I get to teach them bread baking, is that I was about 7, and we would help, not actually hands on, but we were there, and that's how I picked up all these little tricks and odds and ends of baking bread. Now, I have been very lucky because we lived here for as old as I am, and it's a pretty long time. I'm not gonna say how old, but this house has always had an oven. This oven that we using right now is over 15 years old. My mom built it. My mom's been gone for 7, and she would bake bread in this oven. And I'm very happy that a lot of tribal members know that I am a bread baker, because there's only maybe 2 more in the village. And every Saturday I make bread, either here or at the cultural center, and that makes a lot of people happy, even people that are not tribal members. But the tribal members are the ones that are always seeking for this bread. I had a person come in today, and she was all excited because she needed bread. And luckily, we sold like 8 loaves at once. She was going to deliver to other tribal members because they didn't know the bread was baking. So that makes me feel really good and really happy that my parents always taught us to continue doing these things. This is something that's done originally from 300 and some years ago. There's no electricity, there's no gas lines on the ovens. The only thing we heat it up is mesquite. The dough is done by hand. We usually in the back uh, old days, they would put the bread actually on the ground. There was no aluminum we didn't have any aluminum foil. We didn't have any pans that we could put inside. So the bread was done on the ground. The bread itself is made with simple 3-4 ingredients. Teach other people, and especially people that want to learn about baking bread, because that's one of the top traditions.
When we know ourselves well, we form a strong identity. And when we are strengthened, we are powerful.
Ometeo.
My name is Irma Camacho. My Nahuatl name is Yolotlauli, meaning heart of the earth. One of the most important things about the Mexica tradition is that the elders were very much revered and respected. It is through the elders that we learn our wisdom, that we get our direction. And that is a lesson that would be very helpful to today's society, when sometimes people feel like they don't have a basis. But you know, when you have somebody strong in your life, a grandparent, a grandmother, a grandfather, an uncle, an aunt, somebody that shares with you information, that you feel strengthened inside. And it gives me great pleasure, and it is a deep honor for me to introduce Abuela Beatriz Villegas Ilhuacatlawili B. Her Nahuatl name means bearer of light from heaven. I am also honored today to introduce Elvia Fernandez. Elvia Fernandez's family is originally from Papasquiaro, Durango, and by way of Ciudad Juarez. Our connection was to Mother Earth, and we never thought of ourselves as separate.
Busco en la tierra el origen y en el agua la memoria. Busco en la tierra el origen y en el agua la memoria. Busco en el viento mi inspiración y en el fuego mi corazón.
El fueguito es la unión entre la tierra y el universo, entre la tierra y el creador, entre la tierra y la novedad.
Nuestro fuego, que es el vientre, es un pequeño vientre que guarda el fuego. Una mantita roja, que es la conexión de nuestra madre con nuestra madre tierra. En realidad en el Poposcomi están los 4 elementos en sí, en el puro Poposcomi. Si sabemos, el Poposcomi está hecho de barro, de tierra. Las ofrendas que le echamos, el copalito, las hierbitas, todo eso es representación de nuestra madre tierra, representa tierra. El fuego pues está en las bracitas, en el corazón latiente. El viento tiene que estar ahí, está en medio, porque si no, no prendería. El humito que sale simboliza el agua. En el mismo Poposcomi encierra los 4 elementos.
Atl, agua bendita, agua en la que está nuestra memoria ancestral, agua que limpia, agua que nos da vida.
Siempre debe estar en nuestra alma, en nuestro corazón. Ahí debe de vivir siempre. Haya Poposcomi o no, una somadora debe saber siempre llevarlo en su corazón.
Dicen los abuelos que existe un lugar donde hay piedras azules que invitan a rezar, que invitan a cantar. Y yo les pregunté, ¿cuál es ese lugar? ¿Cuál es ese lugar? Calientito, calientito, calientito el temazcal. Calientito, calientito, calientito el temazcal. Hacemos temazcales por muchas razones. Hay muchas formas de temazcal, pero la que quiero platicarles es acerca de nuestro temazcal como mexicas, nuestro temazcal como personas del sur, que nos han dejado nuestros abuelos como nuestro lugar de oración. El temazcal es nuestro lugar sagrado de oración. Cuando entramos primeramente saludando, Ometeo. Este saludo es que entramos con permiso de la dualidad. El temazcal es el vientre de nuestra madre tierra y estamos sentados sobre la tierra. El aire es el viento que produce. Damos gracias a nuestros antepasados y a todos nuestros ancestros por habernos dejado esta fuerza, esta forma de hacer nuestros rezos, este templo que viene siendo como el vientre de nuestras madres, este templo que es el vientre de nuestra madre tierra. Mujer venado, águila mujer jaguar, mujer.
The spirituality of our food is not only does it give us nutrition, but we honor the sacred plants that give us this food. 1,000 years ago, on a day when there was a lot of celestial activity, the small little vegetable that was the predecessor to corn became the maize that we now know. This is the covenant of our ancestors with Mother Earth and with the corn. The next thing that is of importance is the squash and the beans. Those three are considered the three sisters, but all of these are considered the 7 warriors of our food. And they also include nopal, chili, amaranto, and maguey. The maguey is represented here by our maguey plant. And we know that it is how tequila, mezcal, and sotol are made. But we also use it for the agave.
Uno de nuestros mejores compañeros en nuestro corazón de nuestros hogares, nuestro molcajete, nos ayuda a hacer diferentes comidas, unas salsitas riquísimas.
We honor our plants. We give thanks when we harvest, and planting is also a form of ritual and prayer.
Pues ya hemos visto todo esto. We had seen, the different aspects of our tradition, of our culture. But one of the most important for me at this time is that all our history, traditions, and culture is not just that, it's a way of living. And this is the life. En la gran Tenochtitlan, que nos dio su santa luz, que florezca la humanidad.
Our connection was to Mother Earth, and we never thought of ourselves as separate from nature. We are a part of nature. Not only that, but we never thought of ourselves only as individuals. We thought of our families, and we thought of our communities, and we made decisions that way. If many of you think of what's important to you, I bet many of you would say family is important. That comes from our tradition. There may be borders that separate us, but in our blood, in our DNA, in our traditions, there is much that unites us.
The El Paso borderland has a lot to offer when it comes to diversity. Thank you for joining us for this year's virtual Indigenous Peoples Month celebration. We would like to thank everyone that made this possible, especially this year's committee members: Mary Sue Fiedmeth, Michelle Cedillo, and Irma Camacho. We would also like to thank everyone at the Isleta del Sur Pueblo for sharing their history and traditions with us. Until next time, please remain safe and social distance, and make sure to visit our EPCC Diversity Inclusion Program's webpage for future workshops and events.